President Obama speaking today, reaffirming his vow to destroy ISIS, but he's still receiving criticism for going through his trip to Latin America instead of coming home after the deadly terror attacks in Brussels, and especially sitting at a baseball game. The president has said cutting his trip short would play exactly into ISIS's fear tactics. Joining me now, Congressman Steve Cohen, who traveled this week to Cuba with the president. He is a member of many a committee on Capitol Hill, among them the Helsinki Commission on Cooperation in Europe. So, Congressman, wonderful to see you.
Nice to be with you, Brooke. Thank you.
All right. So we'll get to Cuba in just a second. We have to begin with Belgium. Listen, talking to so many of these counterterror experts, they say absolutely Belgium's been this, hot spot for these terrorists. But I was talking to a former CIA counterterrorism official on my show yesterday who said, Brooke, Belgium is just the beginning. Watch Germany, watch more France, watch the UK for potential attacks. Alarmist or realist? I mean, what do you agree with?
I think they're realist. I think that ISIS wants to set off terror and concern throughout the civilized world because they're against the civilized world, and we do have a war on terror. I mean, it was a terrible thing that we had to undergo and experience, and it was a shame that the Bush administration didn't recognize and accept the signals they were given by the CIA to have been on alert before we had 9/11. But they got us into this. We're there. And we need to protect our people and the people of the civilized world against ISIS.
I mean, the State Department even today issuing a warning, alerting U.S. citizens to potential risks of travel to and throughout Europe because of what happened in Brussels. Talking to folks who cover state, they say this is it's a pretty rare thing what the State Department did here. Do you think it's appropriate?
Well, I'm sure it is. The State Department wouldn't do it unless they were concerned about the safety of Americans, and that's the first concern we should always have. This situation, I think, was probably set off by the arrest of the last Paris conspirator, and these folks in Belgium thought they better act before they get captured themselves. It's a shame they weren't captured. They should have been.
On to Cuba. You were at that baseball game, I believe. We saw the president at the baseball game. He said, this is precisely what we should be doing, not, kowtowing to terror. So he was there in Havana, and, he's faced, blistering criticism, obviously from Republicans, specifically John Kasich, even saying, I think the president have come back now and begin to talk to the leaders of Europe. Senator Ted Cruz saying, indeed, President Obama is happily at a baseball game, yucking it up with the Castro communist dictators rather than being in America. Your response to that?
Well, those people think that President Obama makes a mistake every day that he wakes up. And they've had that problem with him ever since he's been elected president, and they can't get over it. He wasn't born in Kenya. He's an outstanding commander-in-chief, and he has telephones. And believe it or not, Air Force One has communications tools to where he can contact and speak with any leader in the world at any time that he needs to, and I'm sure he was doing that while in the air. President Obama doesn't just kind of sit around and play cards. He's a very engaged president, and even in that airplane, he's working, and he's working on behalf of the American people to make us more secure.
Before I let you go, on a personal note, I know that you were in Havana with Secretary Kerry and others back in August when the U.S. Embassy reopened, which was a huge, huge deal. Your passion for Cuba started when you were a young boy and you met Minnie Minoso. I'm sorry you're missing the Rolling Stones on Friday, but can you tell me a story?
There was an exhibition baseball game in Memphis, and I was not quite 6. I was on crutches after having polio. And I had a White Sox cap and shirt, and a baseball player gave me a ball, and I thanked him with my dad, and he said, don't thank me, thank that player over there, number 9, the blackest player on the field. But in segregated Memphis, he didn't feel comfortable giving a ball to a white kid. It set off a friendship that I had with Minoso through his death. He was a warm and gracious man. He was from Cuba. He was my hero. I visited him at the Lorraine Motel on one of his last visits to Memphis, and he stayed at the Lorraine where Dr. King was assassinated 8 years later because of segregation and not at the Peabody. So he taught me about civil rights early. He taught me about kindness to kids, and we just had a Cuban child come to Memphis for pediatric cardiac surgery, and it saved his life, and I was able to help in that regard. And he taught me about the love for Cuba, which I've had. So I've been on the Cuba team for a long time. I was proud to be there and see the flag go up, kind of ending the Berlin Wall in the Caribbean. And now we've got better relations with Cuba and with all Latin American relations as a result. The Cuban people loved our president, and it was American people can travel to Cuba more freely and eventually totally freely, and that was something wrong for the American people.
It's on my bucket list. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little jealous of your multiple trips down there. Congressman Steve Cohen, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Brooke. You're real young. You can get a big bucket.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you for being with me here. The lead.